Down in the dirt. I'm in the dirt.
Ooh, that was harder than I thought it was gonna be.
That's what she said.
I've been a real bad boy on the town all night. Starting to calm down with the morning light. I'm in the dirt. Down in the dirt. Down in the dirt. Down in the dirt. Down in the dirt.
What did you guys think of this week's B-roll? Yo guys, what is going on? Jake Felzine here, back with another B-roll video. Guys, we're having so much fun making them. Carly loves cooking, I love shooting them. It just works great, so we're having a lot of fun doing these, so we're gonna keep doing them. Typically, after you guys have seen the B-roll, at least what I'm kind of trying to do is kind of commentary, talking through things that we did, things that we shot, things that I liked, choreography that I want to try, lighting that I want to try, whatever it may be. We're just kind of doing an iterative process of getting better and better at making cool musical, edits, right? That's the whole fun of this. I love doing these Daniel Schiffer type style, and that's typically what I want to talk about. But today, this was the first shoot of doing this type of video, which is a perfect personal project case of something that I plan to do many, many more of with the a7 III, which is what we're filming on right now. And I just wanted to kind of actually take this section to be a review, or at least a preliminary review of the a7 III, using it how I would use it normally. And kind of like the title says, the thumbnail says, guys, the camera overheated about 30 minutes into the shoot, which was a huge bummer. So first off, we're going to talk about kind of that, how that went, the overheating. We'll address that really quick, but then of course we had to default back to the old chunky monkey GH5S. I love this camera, guys, with the Sigma. Such a good setup. And ultimately, it's going to make a great video to talk about some of their differences. Again, this is first use with that, and I've used this camera tons, so we're just going to try to kind of bounce that back and forth and see kind of what my findings were, at least for kind of the first round. Okay, so straight out of the gates, let's talk about the overheating. I'm not ready to point the blame completely at Sony just yet. I do think there's some more tests, some more things I gotta try. I have not updated the firmware yet. That is on my list to do. I did change a couple of settings. That one that gets called out on kind of the heat threshold, I turned that up. Should take a lot more, hopefully in the future, to overheat this camera. And then I'm gonna try, like taking the battery door off, switching the batteries if the warning light comes on. Never having that LCD screen against there if I'm doing videos. So ultimately, I'm going to try some more things. And I will just say, guys, in general, I do think that I'm like a pretty warm person. I love the winter time because I don't overheat. Like, I go outside and I can do stuff, I can exercise, I can snowmobile, I can play, and it's just not a problem. So I did notice, I was like, man, my hand feels really hot, and it feels like I'm just, the way that I hold cameras, I really kind of death grip it. It felt like I was just trapping that heat in there. So long story short, this camera overheated. I'm not super frustrated yet. Comment down below. Give me your comments. Has anyone else experienced this problem? Do you know of other people who have had this problem with the Sony? What have you done? It seems not that common for the a7 III, so I want you guys to comment down below on some of your findings. But that leads us to our second point in this video, which is comparing this camera, the a7 III, with the GH5S, the shooter, the main camera that I've used for a long time now. And if it wasn't obvious, because again, these cameras are a little hard to grade together, I think I did a pretty good job, so it might have been hard to tell, but basically at about the minute 6 mark is when we actually switched over to this camera. And then, let's see, we switched back, putting the buns down in the toaster. So the minute 16 is when we switched. So that chunk in there was shot with the GH5S, with the Sigma 18-35. You guys know I love this setup. It is so killer, and I'm so used to it. And I mean, as soon as I picked it back up, I was just like, oh yeah, this feels like an old friend, and we've been reunited. Let's talk about some of those differences right now. Maybe you guys are kind of debating on which camera to buy, and I just want to at least talk about, for this B-roll kind of setting, Some of my findings, again, nothing conclusive. No camera is perfect, but if overheating is something you're worried about, I have never heard of anyone with this camera ever having any overheating issues. It's just a smaller sensor, 10 megapixel sensor. It never seems like anyone has overheating issues with this camera, whereas with the a7 III, you do run that risk. Thankfully, I'm not selling this camera, so in the future, I will always have it if this happens again. But, you know, it's something to consider. Right out of the gates, let's just talk about, you know, straight up picking this camera up, guys. This camera is chunky, and I like it. With this big heavy lens, it is so nice to just have that big chunky grip. My pinky doesn't float, it sits on the camera. I've got all of my buttons and dials that I'm used to. Just this bigger camera, I do think I like it a little bit better. I don't know, it's hard to say. Again, it's just personal preference. If I want a chunky camera, I like that I have this, but also I like how small the Sony is. So it's just kind of a give and take. So that was something that I just noticed right away. Bigger grip, better feeling camera in general, and it doesn't overheat. The second thing that I will say is that flip screen, guys. I mean, with this particular shoot, it actually got more in the way than with the Sony screen. With the Sony screen, it just kind of flips out. So when you're doing these B-roll shots, and kind of keeping everything vertical with kind of your, you know, your 3 points of contact, this flippy screen kind of being out to the side like that actually got in the way. If I had to choose, I think I would take the flippy screen just because for more use cases, this is better. But for this particular use case, I actually think I liked the Sony screen better, which, you know, totally surprised me. The other big difference is just like overall ergonomics. This camera just feels snappier. It is newer, so that doesn't surprise me, but like, I do this on all of my cameras. I have this dial on the back set to my ISO adjustments. When you're filming stuff like this, it's really nice to be able to have everything locked off and just adjust your ISO depending on kind of getting that exposure. And with this camera, I mean, like, you hear those clicks, you know? Yeah, let's see. Hopefully you can hear those clicks. But with those clicks, every time you heard a click on this camera, it was an immediate ISO change. No delay, no lag, no nothing. Every time I hit the white balance button, the ISO button, the exposure button, switch from manual to non-manual focus, whatever the case is, this camera just feels snappier. And it's not that like it's a deal breaker on the a7 III, but because it's older, it just feels a little laggy, like it just feels like it has more lag when you're doing some of those adjustments, which again, not a big deal, but speed is everything when it comes to these kinds of things. So if, you know, as far as ergonomics go, I think I would give it to the Panasonic. As far as like really affecting the shoot, probably not enough to really make that big of a difference. You've got a lot of customizable buttons, ways to configure the Sony. It's really not that big of a deal, but it did just feel nice to come back to this camera and have all of these dials feel very analog and just change stuff, you know, when I needed it changed. Real quick, because I'm trying to make this video fast, we're gonna hopefully do a more in-depth review with these guys at another point, but the other thing that I wanna touch on is image quality. So far, and again, I feel like I have light years to learn, to tweak, to play with the a7 III, but so far with the settings that I'm using, I do think that I really like this full frame, high dynamic range, very good S-Log looking image coming out of the Sony. I've always liked the look out of the GH5S. Overall, guys, I do really like the Sigma lens with the GH5S. I've never complained about the image quality, the colors, all of that. I do think that this combo is deadly and it works really well. But if I had to pick image quality, at least so far, knowing that the Sony is only gonna get more refined and just more tweaked and just better, you know, more my style, I do think that I like the Sony better, but it's so close, it's really negligible. So all in all, guys, those are my initial thoughts. Again, neither camera good nor bad for the particular things that I talked about, just kind of different, depends on what you want. That being said, and this is kind of the, you know, the point of this video that I want to make, is like this camera, it overheated, it stopped working, it black screened, and I literally could not record any more video, right? When it comes to a shoot like this, if this was my only camera, I would have been totally screwed. I wouldn't have been able to finish the shoot because I didn't have another camera. Thankfully, I'm a camera-holic and like need to go to therapy, and I own way too many cameras, so I still have my GH5S, but again, you know, in the moment of it, I was just so frustrated that the Sony wasn't working, and it's something to consider. Again, I don't think too many people are having this problem, so I'm trying to figure out, you know, what I'm doing wrong, but, you know, something to keep in mind. I've never had that camera, you know, time lapses in the sun, long days of shooting. I've never had that camera overheat or crap out on me, whereas first time using this camera, we got overheating. So my gosh, suddenly our exposure is terrible. What the actual butt is going on? I'm screwed here. Look at this. So hopefully we got a little bit extra light, but anyway, that's it. We're wrapping up. No conclusive thoughts yet on the Sony a7 III. Again, if it wasn't for overheating, I would just be completely blown away with how much I like this camera, but the overheating was a huge bummer. So we'll do more tests, we'll update the firmware, we'll get everything kind of locked in, and I'll probably have another update video on this camera, and we'll just kind of go from there. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys. Hope you liked this B-roll video. If you did, go check out some of my other ones. I'll put them at the end of this video, and you guys have a good one. Looking forward to the next B-roll video and just anything that I feel like making from here on out, which has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for your support, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
I've been a real bad boy on the town all night.